welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady. I'm with my co-host here, Matt Swartz, and we're going to talk about wedge campers. We're going to talk about why you should consider a wedge camper. And we've got some experts with us here today. We've got Spencer Hauser, and we've also got Peter Williams. And these folks, they build the Super Pacific wedge campers. This podcast is not about their product in particular, but since they're experts on the subject, it's going to give us a great opportunity to kind of riff on why you should consider a wedge camper, things to look for in a wedge camper, things to avoid, maybe that I've experienced in my own testing or Matt's experienced in his own testing, and also some of the new technologies that we're seeing coming out related to wedge campers that are making them more and more of a suitable consideration set for people when they buy a camper. So thanks, guys, for being on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks very much.
And a special thanks to Black Series Camper for supporting this week's podcast. If you want to get out of the camping sites to follow freedom and nature, Black Series Camper can show you the way. From travel trailers to toy haulers, Black Series has options as short as 12 feet or as long as 22 feet. A lineup ready for any need and any situation. Get yourself and your family out to enjoy nature in comfort and style. See Black Series in person at the Overland Expo shows, where you can meet with their team and explore their different models on display in person. Please visit Black Series homepage at blackseries.net. The first thing that I think we should talk about is the benefit of the wedge camper. Historically, you would see something like a Winnebago, or you'd see a Westphalia van, and it has this pop top style camper. Those were the first times we saw that coming into play. And then, of course, we saw roof tents for a long time. And then we saw wedge style roof tents. And then we would see, of course, people with pickup trucks with fiberglass shells or with aluminum shells on top of their truck. We now see this kind of amalgamation of those technologies and solutions coming into what we now call in the industry a wedge camper. And there are different kinds. There are some that, like Adventure Trailers, AT Overland makes some that go straight up. There's other companies that make some that come up at an angle, and they all have their advantages as well. I particularly like the one that comes up at an angle because you can put the nose of the vehicle into the wind and you get a much quieter place to sleep. But then if you need maximum headroom, you may want one that goes up, or even one that swings out all the way over the back if you've got a bunch of people that you're trying to pack into a topper.
Yep.
So
plus that wedge makes a really sweet dirt bike jump if you really need
I like that. Oh, I didn't even consider that.
Yeah.
I mean, what have I been doing wrong?
You got to take the Moto Guzzi off the roof of my camper now.
I have to admit, like yesterday I was driving through Prescott and there was one of those trailers that they used to like back off a D9 Cat or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
The ramp was down. I was on the Moto Guzzi.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Action,
I think
action
every single knucklehead like myself looks at that and thinks, I should jump that. I should totally.
And if there was a flaming ring of fire, I mean, you wouldn't be able to stop yourself.
Exactly.
Really. Yeah.
Exactly. So there you go. Wedge camper. It's the reason to buy it is because it becomes part of your jumping routine.
Yeah,
for sure.
Totally.
I like that.
Evil Knievel endorsed.
I like that a lot. And when we think about some of the great strengths of those types of campers is it really comes down to reduced weight. Yep. One of the difficulties, especially when you're looking at a smaller truck like a Tacoma or a half-ton pickup, one of the biggest challenges is keeping these trucks at their payload. For example, what does your camper typically come in at for weight?
They're roughly 350 to 370.
Yeah. So that's incredibly light. Whereas like a typical raising roof camper that slides in to the back of a pickup, you're lucky if you get in at 1,100 to 1,500 pounds. And that's oftentimes the full payload that those trucks will have. Now, Matt, your truck is a little different. So what led you to decide on a 3/4 ton Ram to go with a wedge style camper, even though you've got the payload for another camper?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you talked about payload. Just because you have a lot of payload or don't have a lot of payload, you don't want to use all of it. Like if your infrastructure maxes you out, then what happens when you start putting passengers and water and food and camping gear in?
Or like those nice bumpers you've got on your truck?
Well, those add some significant weight. But, the reality is even with a full-size truck, our payload's something in the neighborhood of 2,300 pounds. And you can eat that up pretty quickly when you start bolting stuff on. A wedge camper that weighs 370 pounds, that's kind of the sweet spot for us. I don't want to reduce the capability of my truck by putting something on it. I want to enhance the capability. And so I think in this case, that's what the wedge camper does. It's going to give us added good functionality without taking away from what the truck can do. And especially since we hold the Airstream, being able to separate and have that secure storage and a sleeping place. I mean, that's like everything we want to be able to do with our vehicle.
Well, and that, I think your use case is such a great example of that. You've got a 3/4 ton truck that does have good payload, but you're towing an Airstream. What's the tongue weight of the Airstream? Do you remember?
I think the tongue weight is around 500 pounds.
Yeah. So let's say it's in the 500 to 700 pound range. Once you load it up with some gear, that goes against your payload because that's tongue weight.
Right.
You take away 500 to 700 pounds, you add 350 pounds, you add some gear, you add some bumpers,
400 pounds of bumpers.
Yeah. And then you add a couple adults and your puppy dog. And next thing you know, you're really, even on a 3/4 ton truck, you're getting close to those payload numbers. We have to remember too, that the performance of a vehicle is very much a reflection of its weight. So there's a reason why a sand rail performs as well as it does in the dunes, even as 2-wheel drive, because they're incredibly light and powerful. So their performance to weight ratio is very high. So just because we have the payload, we may want certain performance characteristics of the vehicle. We may want it to handle a certain way, or we may do a lot of deep mud or sand or snow, when the total weight of the vehicle compared to the contact patch of the tire is a really critical consideration. So that's where, in my mind, I see that these toppers are oftentimes exactly what somebody needs. The other thing that I've noticed is because it's not a slide-in camper, you get rid of all of this other material. So because it's being bolted to the top of the bed, you now don't have all of that extra structure that would go in where the wheel wells are. You gain a lot more space on the inside too.
Absolutely.
Sometimes a sliding camper, you can access those little cubbies and things like that through little doors, but it gets super dusty or it's not easy to get access to. And it adds in a lot of additional weight while you're losing space efficiency. So that's another real benefit of these Wedge campers, is that you have a very space efficient interior. You get the whole bed.
Yep, exactly.
And what have you guys done to maximize the available interior space? It's kind of a loaded question because we found in other campers that they don't always optimize those interior spaces.
Right. We had to kind of find the magic spot between a straight walled camper and something with a really radical side angle.
Sure.
Right. We actually made our tent itself a little bit wider than a lot of the other tents that are on the market, so that we could have some of the benefits of a pure straight walled camper, yet still retain some of the characteristics and the aerodynamics.
Sure. The airflow.
Yeah. Of trying to keep it close to that cab angle. So that was one of the things that we did.
Yeah. We definitely find that the straight up and down ones, they'll end up with a lot more pinstriping. You also have that frontal resistance of the camper when it goes up by where the cab is. So you get quite a bit of impact to your airflow, which that's one of the benefits of the Wedge campers, is you're typically not having a big impact to aero, usually much less than you would with a roof tent. You really find that you have good aero out of a Wedge camper, but you don't want those sides to be too much of an angle, because then when you're sitting inside, like on a bench, then you're leaning forward. You can't sit up right when you're on a built-out interior.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so we try to maximize the width of the camper right to the edge of the bed rail, but then try to find that magic spot in the height. Gives you some lean angle, but not a tremendous amount of lean angle. So you're bending over.
And what are you guys finding when people are purchasing these campers? Are they looking to just have them be a replacement for a shell that they can camp in, or are they looking to do full interior build-outs?
It's a real mixed bag. There's pretty much full spectrum of, some of our folks get in there and want to do a big custom build out kind of permanent setup, so it's ready to go camping every day. For me, one of the huge advantages of this style of camper is that it leaves your truck bed as a truck bed. And so you've essentially, with our product in particular, you have a commercial grade canopy on your truck bed. So during the work week, you're set and you can do whatever you need for your daily driver. But then the transition to camping, is really quick. The way that we're set up in my house is we just have all our gear in totes. We load up, go to the grocery store, and we're out. That versatility is a huge advantage.
That's interesting. You kind of refer to it as this commercial grade topper. So are there load bars on the top? Like, could you put your ladder for the tradesmen? Are you seeing people use this for tradesmen, are using it during the week to go to the job site and they pull their stuff out and they go camping? Is it designed to take some load on the roof as well?
Yeah, it'll carry closed. The load transfer is just metal to metal down.
Yeah,
so it can carry quite a bit of weight closed.
And do you guys have available crossbars as well?
The way we design it is so that it can be accessorized with anything you want.
You've got like a rail or a channel panel up
Yeah.
there.
So there's T-slot on the top, and Yakima has a setup you can throw on there. Yeah. So you just have a lot of options.
And
Yeah,
it kind of goes beyond just things that are specifically designed for vehicles. This is one of the things that appealed about it to me so much from a DIY standpoint is those rails, like you can use 80/20, like you can get pretty creative with other materials and ways of attaching things. And some of the users, some of the people that own it have done that, right? I mean, people have gotten pretty creative
It's
with what they
super fun to see what people do.
Yeah.
Like, there's some clever folks out there doing some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier about maximizing interior space. That was a big kind of design philosophy as we worked through it and was looking at everybody has a different use case. So
Sure.
we tried to build a framework that you could then go in and really customize and optimize to your needs, and maximize that space, because quite a bit of space if you're thoughtful in how you use it.
Yeah, for sure. And Matt, for you, when you started looking on the market, what were the things that you were hoping the Wedge camper would accomplish? What were some of the considerations that you had before you made this investment to put it on top of your truck?
Yeah. So I think two of the biggest things for me, why the Wedge camper is like the right choice for our scenario. Before we talked about, like, I never wanted to take away capability from the truck with adding something. I want everything I add to add capability to the truck. Mm-hmm. And so the Wedge camper accomplished that in terms of secure storage, right? So we went from an open bed, which obviously there's like tonneau covers and, there's dedicated canopies that don't have tents. Like, sure, those are all options, but the switchback gives me that secure storage. So now all of a sudden living out of the Airstream, which is surprisingly limited on space, given how comfortable it is and roomy on the interior, but like we end up using our shower for storage. Sure. So now all of a sudden, all of the paragliders and, tools and whatever that's lived in there can go in the back of the truck and I can lock it in there and I have confidence that it's secure. That's huge. Like that opens up a whole lot of usable space inside the trailer. That was one thing I was looking at. And that could have been independent of the switchback. Any Wedge camper is going to give you that. Any canopy is going to give you that. So I think that's huge. I also wanted to simplify the camp setup, right? Sure. And this is where the Wedge tent is awesome. I'm not a huge fan of rooftop tents in general, but I think the one exception to that is the Wedge tent because it is very quick. There's 2 latches. You push it up, the gas struts do the work, and then it's set up. You don't have to insert all these rods to hold out portions of the fly. And that's the thing. Like I've camped in a lot of roof tents that are actually more labor intensive and more difficult to set up than ground tents.
Way more. Yeah.
Exactly.
And putting them away is even worse.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And you're having to climb around the truck like a rock climber. And that doesn't work for everyone. Like some people are just not physically capable of that.
Or tall enough. Yeah.
Right. And so, that kind of excludes a certain segment of the market. So I see when it comes to the rooftop tent, the Wedge, I think adds speed. It makes things simpler.
Yeah, it's always been my choice.
Yeah.
Or even those like hybrid wedges where they still go up like a wedge, but it's got some mechanism that gives a little bit more footbox space.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
Those work out really, really well. How does the mechanism work in your camper? How does it lift?
So it's just a pair of gas struts that
are they inside the tent or are they outside the tent?
They're outside the tent, but they're interior to the extrusion.
Sure.
So when it's closed, there's no gas struts on the outside are exposed. And it's just a big heavy duty machined hinge on the front end. Incidentally, our first design was just as you described earlier, Scott, with kind of a mechanism that would give
scissor
you
mechanism.
Would give you that foot box. We played around with it and kind of did some mock-ups and models and stuff. And we were just a little worried about coming to market with something with a mechanism like that.
Sure.
That if we messed it up, it failed right out of the box. Nobody's going to trust Super Pacific. Right?
Sure.
We decided to go with just the single hinge where it does limit your foot box a little bit, but it's a super, super reliable mechanism.
What I've noticed with that is because you have that continuous engagement along the leading edge of the camper, that even in high winds, even side-loaded winds, you don't get a lot of movement of that top.
Oh, not at all.
Whereas the scissor mechanisms, because they're relying on tension on the fabric and then upward force of the struts, they can still move around quite a bit. And even when you're trying to put them down, they can actually get off axis enough that they can start to pinch material or even cut material. I had a roof tent that I was testing that was in that configuration, and the wind was just enough that when it came down, it actually scissor cut the fabric between the mechanism. They've since redesigned the structure so it does, based on feedback, which is why we're out there banging on these things all the time so we can give people that kind of feedback. The other thing that I've noticed that you'll see done is that they'll do a good job, and I'm not sure how yours, I've not even seen the inside of your camper yet, but a lot of them, they'll use some kind of felting or they'll use some kind of carpet material on the walls and on the ceiling to manage condensation. How do you guys manage condensation in the tent?
We designed in a bunch of passive ventilation so that the air can just circulate.
Sure.
You know, we're in the Pacific Northwest, so we really designed it with like wet camping in mind.
Sure. Lots of humidity. Yeah.
Humidity and rainy long winters. So
sure.
We kind of imagined ourselves out there in a rainy winter camp. We wanted to be able to have vents open, but sheltered from rain. So even if you're socked in, you can still get some air circulating. And it's been really effective for managing condensation. We've gotten a lot of feedback from customers that it's pretty much not been an issue.
Oh, that's great.
Of course, sometimes there's so much ambient moisture that it just clings to stuff. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Nothing's going to work for you. You have a max air fan or whatever in there. It's not going to do you any good.
Right. Yeah. It's more about kind of managing where that condensation goes.
Yeah. The path out.
Yeah. If it's 98% relative humidity, it's humid everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't get rid of it.
You're basically underwater.
Yeah.
It's just not very dense.
Well, and another thing that I really like about that, I mean, if you look at the different styles, the ones that will flip out all the way up and over the back, you end up with an awning. So that's a real advantage. You end up with an
cool design.
enormous amount of interior space, but then you have all tent material. So they can be in the ones that I've slept in, they can be louder. They aren't as well insulated. So in colder environments, they're more difficult to heat because you have so much tent material. You also have the chance of the tent material. There's a lot more tent material to potentially fail or need repair, but you do end up with an enormous amount of interior space. A lot of them will even have the capability of having like a small cot or something like that suspends in the part over the bed. So that's one style. The other style that we've seen are the kinds that go straight up. So that's like you'd see on a four-wheel camper, slide-in camper. And they even have their own model now that kind of bolts to the top of the bed and it goes straight up. Those you end up, when you've got the bed kind of tucked all the way out of the way or the sleeping surface tucked all the way out of the way, you end up with a lot more standing space. So you can fit more people. Like if you wanted to have a party, you got a lot more space in there or kind of moving around in there. So I think that that's an advantage. But I think that the reason why we see most of them being wedge campers is because of the durability of the structure. The structure ends up being very durable. And why I like wedge style roof tents is the fact that you can point the vehicle into the wind. Like right now we're in Flagstaff at the Overland Expo, and it is what you guys say it was like Armageddon or like
it was Mad Max.
Yeah,
it was total Mad Max.
It's like Mad Max out there. It's gnarly. I mean, there's all kinds of accoutrement like flying through the air and signs and tents and everything. I mean, it's bad. It's
Home Depot sold out of sandbags over the course of yesterday.
Yeah, I believe it.
The Windy app was showing the peak gusts up into the low 50s.
I saw that too.
Yeah, so that's gale force winds. And we can see that the impact on anything that has a broad surface. We're in a Black Series trailer that's well insulated and it's behind the tent. It's got some other things that are blocking the wind. So it's actually very quiet in here. But when you're dealing with bad weather, so when you have a roof that's at an angle, you can shed snow and snow load, snow weight. You have much less tent surface area that you have to deal with losing your interior heat if you're heating the interior of the camper. And then for me, the thing that's most important is being able to point it into the wind. I remember I was in San Evaristo, which is a very remote bay in Baja, and I had a roof tent that was a wedge style and I could point it into the wind. And there was another camper nearby with another style of roof tent, a traditional clamshell style, and they broke a bunch of their poles, you know, and it was a very high quality tent. It was just so bad. The wind was so bad that they basically had to try to fold up the tent the best they could and sleep inside. I mean, I sleep like a log anyways, but I never woke up. Like it was just not an issue. It is that much better.
Oh, no. Yeah. We are right now where we are in our booth. Both our trucks are pointed into the wind. Our tents are hardly moving. Our flags are breaking.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
And the poor guys at Outdoor by 4, their whole canopy collapsed.
Oh no!
But we're just sitting there, and customers are coming up and going, "Oh, it's not even really flapping or anything." It's like, because it's pointing right into the wind. It's perfect.
It's almost the kind of weather you want to demo
totally
how successful the product is. I mean, and like you walk around the event and you can see what's working and what's not working.
When you guys look at where the market is right now, because there are so many different options. I mean, Go Fast makes a great product and AT Overland makes a great product. You guys make a great product. Alu Cab, there's a bunch of them on the market. What are you seeing as far as innovation or where do you think that there are opportunities to continue to move wedge campers forward? What do you think is going to be the next evolution of, without giving away your own trade secrets, but what do you think are
think a little bit about
are some needs that still exist? Because I've got some thoughts that come to mind for me, but I'm curious what you guys see for needs that still exist in the market.
I really like what Hiatus has done with their hard-sided pop-up.
Yeah.
That's super cool. The kind of origami. I don't know if you're familiar with them or not, but but that I
Red Tail's doing that. Yeah.
Red Tail's doing that as well.
Yep.
I'm surprised that they haven't come out with a wedge style truck camper, because they've got so much technology and innovation, the design and engineering that they put into making a roof tent.
Totally.
Seems like it would be expensive, not, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be a fair value, but just the nature of carbon fiber and everything is expensive.
It'd be a compelling product, man.
It would be really interesting. Some of the things that I think that there are opportunities around is starting to integrate more and more modularity, like lightweight build outs. So that way, you can hang different structures from the side for storage. You can, kind of like what Goose Gear does, but finding a way to do that super lightweight, really simple. You talk about how you move things in and out of your truck, having it where it's really easy to do that. So it's not, because I think that the permanent build out, maybe it works for some people, or maybe it's what they think they need in there, but I don't know that the permanent build out is actually the right solution for most people. It depends
a lot on time of life, what I mean? And just what your circumstances are. But if the truck you take out for adventures is also your daily driver, the permanent build out's tough.
Yeah.
I just went, my parents were in town, in Portland. My dad loves the Air Museum in McMinnville.
Okay.
So we went and looked. I got super inspired. I'm already very familiar with airplanes, right? But just looking at all these jets and things and how lightweight the gauge material that they're using compared to what we're building our stuff out of. Now, our stuff is bulletproof, right? It's just burly. But it got me thinking about, truck bodies are made out of very, very thin material. Why couldn't we go really, really lightweight with what we do? But you're going to have to also get a customer that's used to a door that you can kind of push and dimple, just like you can to the side of your truck.
Right.
And I think so, like you're saying, with this kind of super lightweight and modular kind of thing.
This content is brought to you by Overland Journal, our premium quality print publication. The magazine was founded in 2006 with the goal of providing independent equipment and vehicle reviews, along with the most stunning adventures and photography. We care deeply about the countries and cultures we visit and share our experiences freely with our readers. We also have zero advertorial policy and do not accept any advertiser compensation for our reviews. By subscribing to Overland Journal, you're helping to support our employee-owned and veteran-owned publication. Your support also provides resources and funding for content like you are watching or listening to right now. You can subscribe directly on our website at overlandjournal.com.
I hear you.
That's where I think that there's a lot of opportunity, is that they're already light. If you look at a Tacoma, I mean, you can have a couple buddies and a sandwich for the payload that they've got, so it just seems like that there's such an opportunity to go to look after what are how light could you make a wedge style camper? And if they start getting into that same weight range of like an air topper or any of the standard fiberglass toppers, where you start looking at 200 pounds, 220 pounds, I think that would be really impressive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I also thought that, opportunities for how do we integrate the awning into the structure of it? So you're not bolting an awning onto the side of it.
Sure.
You're taking advantage of some of the structure that's already there. That also seems to make a lot of sense to me. How do you integrate technology too? Right now we have the Starlink satellite dish it's mounted on the top of the Black Series. But the people who start to think about how do we make it really easy for people that want to work remote to mount these tools to do their job.
With COVID, we were kind of this weird hybrid, and we're a startup, so we're weird hybrid. You never stop working at home, right?
For sure. Well, that's the cool thing about being a startup or owning your own business. You get to pick whatever 14 hours a day you want to work.
Minimum 14 hours a day. Yeah, exactly.
And you can do it anywhere you want.
You have total control over that 14 hours. Yeah.
Yeah. But we've had a lot of customers kind of talk about that because of COVID. COVID. Now they're used to working remotely, and having success being way off in the woods and just typing away. Pete's got a lot of thoughts and ideas around, what we could do for that.
Yeah, I think there's just so many cool opportunities to try to help these remote workers achieve their goals.
Totally.
And I think that the manufacturers that start to pay attention to that and really integrate those solutions, I think is a very cool idea. And as you guys have done with making a very lightweight camper, there's been enough Wedge style campers out there that you were like, that works well, or this doesn't work so well, or you see feedback from bloggers, you guys mentioned, reading the Overland Journal article on Wedge campers, you're able to realize like that there are things that maybe people thought would work and they don't work.
Sure.
And then we can begin to refine the product. How about you, Matt? What have you seen in the work that you've done around Wedge campers where you're like, you know what? It would be really cool if it did this or that.
I mean, that's a good question. I think
a launching pad for your paragliding.
Yeah, exactly.
Big slingshot on the top, right?
If you had really strong gas springs, you could get a catapult type thing.
Yeah,
I like that.
Totally.
Definitely. We could do a roof mounted winch to pull us up into the air. One person drives the truck, the other hooks into a cable.
Oh, good idea.
Honestly, I don't have any big ideas, which is probably why I'm not a person designing these things, but I see some of the things that you guys have done differently with your product that stood out to me. And, it kind of comes back to what you were just talking about, being able to integrate things and make these work for the user however they need.
Right.
The T-slots all around. It's so simple to start there and let the user figure out what they want to do with it. It leaves the door open for that. The threaded bosses on the inside, for, I'm sure, accessories that we'll see down the road. So that kind of thing, I think thinking in that mindset of like, how can we present infrastructure that can easily be customized? Because it's so hard to say that any one person wants or needs one specific thing. If you kind of leave the door open to the individual, people can innovate on their own. I mean, one thing that's kind of very different, but in the same space that I've seen recently is there's this inflatable bed canopy that you can get now. Have you guys seen this?
Yes.
I think it's like RF welded. It's kind of like the technology of a paddleboard. I don't know what the weight is. Graham just wrote it up. But,
and it pops up when you inflate it.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of thing is cool. So that's a little different. No, I wish I had some better ideas around that. I'm just psyched to see, I think what you were talking about, the lightweight, a modular kind of interior, because I don't want to build out the bed with like a full camping setup, but a little more infrastructure might be beneficial at times.
Even paying attention to people's needs around side windows. For example, like the windows that are in this Black Series, I think they're perfect for 80% of users, but they don't survive well with brush scrapes and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at the windows that are in an Earth Roamer, and there's other big campers that use them as well, they're glass.
Yeah.
And they are incredibly strong, tempered.
Yep.
They've got all the integration of the shades and privacy and all that other stuff. And then the way that they fit flush, I mean, they just end up being incredibly robust in those conditions where we end up with a lot of brush scrapes and stuff like that. Did you end up going with side windows on your camper, Matt?
There's two windows, but they're on the front. So at the back of the cab. So you can so you can see in from the cab of the truck, and then there's a rear window.
That makes sense.
So you can see in from the back there.
So you can see the Airstream behind you, make sure it's still there.
Yeah. One thing did come to mind and it's not necessarily innovation, but it's kind of like prepping the product right for customers. I think a really cool feature that I'd like to see adopted more widely is designing a camper that allows the customer to integrate anything that would require routing wires anywhere. So make it set up so that the customer doesn't have to create any roof penetrations whatsoever and can get a wire to any corner of the camper.
Yeah, that would be really useful for sure.
We've thought about that a little bit. That's a challenge.
I mean, you guys have gotten very close. I will say, because like you have the wire chases like all throughout. It's 90% of what I just described.
Right, but that last 10%, trying to figure out how to get it out of the tent, keep it sealed up,
keep it waterproof.
That's why you guys are engineers and you just test the stuff.
Well, and I think one of the biggest engineering challenges, and you guys may chuckle at this, but I think one of the biggest engineering challenges of the Wedge camper is the integration with the tailgate. How do you possibly keep dust out of that spot?
It is.
How do you guys deal with that?
We have an adjustable bottom gasket.
Oh, nice.
That for most of the modern trucks that have the big wide 4-inch wide tailgates, you can adjust down into that. And we've got a pretty good gasket as opposed to kind of a wiper type of gasket. This is a surface.
I don't find that the wiper ones work. There's so much like kind of vacuum negatives, back. I don't know what you guys are engineers, but that term escapes me at the moment. But when you drive,
vacuum's a good term.
Yeah.
It just because you're running down the trail and and it's creating this vacuum at the back of the vehicle, and it's
like an
just
airplane wing.
Yeah, totally.
It just pulls the dust right in past that seal.
Yeah. So we got that surface, but there's this little area in the very corner where the tailgate and the camper, like the body of the camper and the back door all meet.
Yeah.
And that is,
it is quite a challenge.
Nightmare. Yeah.
It is quite a challenge. And then the tailgate itself is not sealed between the body sides, because it doesn't have to for their purposes. They're selling a pickup. That gap is there, and it just can pump. What I always thought is why not create some positive pressure in the camper? Because you want a fan in there for ventilation anyways. So maybe there's a way to run the fan in reverse.
It's like a breathable fabric for dust.
Yeah. And it just has a little bit of some kind of a filter or a membrane, and you can just pack some positive pressure ventilation into the camper so that you're forcing dust out.
Yeah. Is it RSI? They has something like that.
They do on their toppers. They have some sort of, it's like a positive air vent that creates positive pressure.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen that. The first thing that comes to mind is if you're the first guy in line, that's awesome. But if you're the third guy in line, just driving through that constant dust cloud, aren't you just filling your camper up with dust? And I've never had a chance to test it.
Sure.
So there may be something,
they'd have to have some kind of a filter.
Well, there is a layer of dead air that is over the surface of things as air's coming over it.
Sure.
So maybe
they've got it in the right spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you also want the vent when you're sleeping up there, you want to be able to, extract the air out of the camper, if you're cooking inside or whatever, you can pull a little bit of air through the windows, keep you cool when you're sleeping. But it seems like reversing that and creating some positive pressure, but I've never seen anybody do that right yet. That's one of the challenges.
Scuba tanks.
Just fill a bunch of balloons and then kind of pop them as you go. They'll pop as you drive down the road.
Totally. But anytime I've ever used a Wedge camper, I'm just always shocked by the amount of dust that ends up in the back.
Well, that is, I think, a big difference between a Wedge camper and a slide-in is because you are sealing. Our campers seal to the top of the truck bed rails. So from the rails up, we're really confident that we've got a tight product. But from the rails down, you're sort of on your own. And they design truck beds for draining. Yeah. You know what I mean? They don't design them to be tight against dust and water.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's almost like you could have a tailgate delete back door that you guys, it would be so model specific. Then you start to get into a bunch of tooling and everything else. But
we have seen, we've got some customers are just this is what I signed up for. I'm cool with it. And others are going hard to try and just lock it out and make that thing float if it ever gets in the water,
Yeah, sure.
But it's really fun to see how people run that down and how they seal up around their tailgates and
find a way to make it work.
Kind of fill all the little gaps that are just part of the truck bed, Yeah. People get into it.
Yeah,
it's cool to see.
They sure do. Yeah. Absolutely. What inspired you guys to do this? I think you mentioned you had a machine shop and now you're making cool campers. So how did you go from that to this?
I had a machine shop and had a company that made Ducati motorcycle parts.
Oh, that's
for
cool.
About 10 years. Yeah.
That's cool.
Early teens, we sold the brand and shut that down, and I went off to do some other things. And then Pete came to me, and I'd say you take the story from here.
I guess the real genesis of this whole thing is I've got a 6-year-old son now, and he was 3 when we were first picked this idea off. And we had a 2005 Forester and a dog, and to get out for a night in the woods was this Herculean effort.
Sure.
My partner and I started looking at what's out there, what would be a better kind of adventure vehicle to have an adventurous family with. And we landed on a 4-door pickup as the right thing for us. I started looking at sliding campers, all that stuff didn't quite fit into our life. Started seeing these kind of Wedge top of the truck bed rail campers out there. Spencer and I had worked together at a design consultancy in the past, and we both just are pretty passionate about designing and making stuff. So I went over to his place and showed him kind of what I'd been looking at, kind of what was on the market at that point. And I was like, man, let's build campers this summer. Let's do a summer project. We'll make one for your F-150, one for my Tacoma.
It'll be easy.
Yeah, we'll just knock it out. So that led us into really a deep dive on what's out there. How are people doing this? How would we do this? Oh, it'd be cool. And we just got into it, and then that kind of led into what, maybe instead of a summer project, we should actually look at this, design this thing for manufacturing and think about what a business around this thing might look, because it looked like there was an opportunity.
Oh, there's so much opportunity. We just see them everywhere now. 10 years ago, you saw roof tents on every vehicle. Now, when you walk around Overland, there's a lot of roof tents. I'm not saying that there's not a lot of roof tents, but you don't see as many clamshell style roof tents anymore. You see mostly hard shell roof tents. You see a lot of these Wedge campers.
There's a product from way back in the day called a Wilderness.
Yeah. That was the real deal.
When I was driving little Toyota pickups, I was always like, I got to find one of those. I got to get one of those. But
in fact, wasn't that designed by, it was a famous mountain climber, like a rock climber. We'll have to put that in the show notes, but yeah, it was designed or it was run by like Alex somebody or whatever. I mean, it was like one of those famous rock climbers.
Yeah,
I don't know who designed
and
it.
he just like, he built the thing that he wanted to go out.
Yeah.
Just like you guys.
Yeah.
You're like, we've got some problems we need to solve. And he built this real, and now they were very different in the fact that they didn't go out over the back. They flipped out to the side and then they had support rods and stuff like that could hold them up. Yeah. They're pretty amazing.
Yeah, totally.
They totally like captured my imagination back in
No
it was
doubt.
like the late 90s probably.
I
when
remember.
seeing them. Yeah.
Yeah. They were, I mean, if he had just held on for like another 5 years.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they would have taken off. And of course, Flip Pack was one of the really early ones as well.
Exactly.
They were fiberglass tops made in Southern California. And I don't know if they're still in business or not, but these guys were just a little bit before the explosion.
Totally.
Yeah, pretty amazing to see that. And Matt, what do you think what's going to be your first adventures with the new Wedge camper?
Man.
What's the goal? Because I mean,
The
for
goal
you, it
is,
solves a bunch of problems.
It does. I mean, the big goal for me is like, let's park the Airstream and break off and do something a little bit more out there. Let's just get kind of back to the roots of why we travel and do this stuff. It's not to be in like a luxurious, comfortable Airstream all the time. It's to go and have these really cool experiences. That's the difference between like living on the road and going out and having an adventure. And they can kind of coalesce and they can be intertwined, but there's always compromises to make, right? And like long-term living on the road for me dictates a certain level of basic necessity, comfort kind of stuff. So the Wedge camper for me is like, I'm kind of excited to get back out there. So that might be like driving on a road that I would never take the Airstream on, right? Getting to a beautiful campsite. There's one that comes to mind in Ouray that's above the town that there's no way I could bring the trailer up there. I know I can get my truck up there with the new camper though.
And it's totally worth being there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But in the real immediate future, we're flying back to the Portland area after this event and the truck's out there. We're going to grab it and we're going to head out to Eastern Washington for paragliding flying. So I imagine we're going to be driving Retrieve and hopefully we're going to be driving up to some pretty cool spots and maybe having some camping opportunities there.
Well, and I remember, Matt, when you first talked about getting a topper, because at first you thought, well, I'm going to get some kind of a rack back there. And then you're like, nah, because it doesn't solve the security issue. So then you started looking at, just regular canopies. And then you realize like, if I'm going to get a canopy, I might as well get something that I can camp out of. Maybe it adds 100 pounds over a canopy, maybe 150.
Yeah, not
at the most. It just doesn't add that much.
No, it's just such an easy decision to make. It's like have the tent, have the shelter.
Yeah.
And it's not just a place to sleep. Like you can move the floor and stand up in the bed of the truck and have full weather protection. I mean, it is a level above just a rooftop tent.
That feature of being able to pop it up, stand in your truck bed and push the bed forward. Like for me, at this time in my life, it's all about getting outside with my 6-year-old son and like ski days. Even if I didn't sleep in that thing, just being able to get in there and like get in and out of wet clothes.
Totally makes sense.
Do what you need to do.
And be out of the weather a little bit. I mean,
so useful.
Because Matt, you still do a lot of rock climbing and stuff. I mean, to be able to change at the end of the day or to change into whatever you got to get, or
to be honest, we had put a lot of that on pause with the paragliding because it's just kind of like consumed all of our free time. But we have been climbing lately. Like in the last couple of months, we went to Indian Creek and we were climbing around Moab. And again, that's where I'm like, I wish we didn't have the camper installed all the time. I'm like, I wish I had that secure storage, leave the climbing gear in the back of the truck overnight and not have to worry about someone, helping themselves to it, keeping it protected from dust while we're driving down those long dirt roads to get to the climbing crag.
Totally.
Within my family, we've discovered all these kind of urban use scenarios around the Wedge camper because it's so quick and easy to deploy. Both my daughters play a lot of soccer. Many a soccer game, pull up to the edge of the field when it's raining, you pop the top, me and my wife sit up top there. We can see over the fences, you can see the whole field. So you're watching the game while all the rest of the parents are getting soaked. That's super great.
Next level.
Yeah. Muddy kids coming off the soccer field, being all muddy and stuff. You pop the top, kid goes in the back, changes their clothes all out. My brother-in-law's dirt biker, same thing. He'll come off the trail, jump in the back, be able to change out of all his gear.
Totally makes sense.
Our surfing buddies do the same thing. So
it would be a great surf kind of platform as well.
Getting in out of a wetsuit. It's like, it's downright humiliating sometimes.
Well, and we talk a lot. In that's true. It is so true. It's like, why is this so hard to get off? Right. And you're exhausted after whatever surfing or spearfishing or
can do it in
whatever.
privacy
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're flailing around. We talk a lot in this podcast about spending less, bringing less, being more minimalist in the way that you approach travel. And that is one of the things that I find so compelling about the Wedge style campers is that they are very simple. They are much less expensive than a full camper. They're much lighter than a full camper. And I think it solves the needs of many people. For those that are listening, if you're looking at trying to build out a camper or you want to have a camper installed on the back of your truck that you can sleep in, it's worth considering a Wedge camper for that because they are so much less expensive and they are so much lighter at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a number of companies to choose from, and we all kind of have these specific lanes. You've got a
lot of good options. You can
basically.
You should be able to find something that really fixes whatever problem you're trying to solve.
I've been having that conversation with folks who have already seen the camper and they're like, what is that? And, I'll talk to them. But yeah, the truth is there are so many good options right now. Like you should be able to find one that kind of fulfills all of your basic needs. Yeah. And they're just all so solid and most of them are so well made. It's awesome to see that.
Absolutely.
It has been fun to see in the couple years we've been doing it, to see a bunch more pop up and like a bunch of other approaches to solving similar problems. It's it's very cool to watch how people approach that.
Well, and you guys are able to create a business that's consistent with your passion. You're doing it in Oregon. You're employing people in your community. You're manufacturing the product in the United States. It's something that people can get serviced here. It's designed to be used in the remote conditions and rugged conditions around the planet. I think that it's a very compelling product for so many people, especially as we start seeing people migrate more away from wagons and towards pickups.
Yep.
So it's pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, it's exciting. And we're very lucky guys.
For sure.
We're having a good time doing this.
Well, Spencer and Peter, we appreciate your time. Matt, do you got any other questions or comments that you wanted to fire off around Wedge campers?
Oh man, no, just it's really fun since having that on. People have come out of the woodwork and they're like, you have the ideal setup. That's what I want to do. I want to do a travel trailer and a Wedge camper. And I'm like, I'm glad that I'm not the only one that thinks this is like a really compelling way to do the full-time travel thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just so excited that when, we park the trailer and we just want to use the truck, that's an option now. And it's, it's more full featured and it gives us everything we need. So my only question is like, how soon can we see more accessories? Like I want to see, all the ideas that you guys have come to fruition.
Well, yeah, it'll be fun to see what you guys come up with next and what we see from the industry next with Wedge campers. I think it's a really compelling choice. So, well, we appreciate you guys being on the podcast. We will talk to you all next time.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.